Hello and thank you so much for tuning into this eyeshadow palette collection video. I just wanted to pop in with a really quick intro explaining some comments that I make throughout the duration of the collection video in reference to a new series that I'm going to be starting here on my channel called Project Palette Probation. One of my goals for this year is to figure out which eyeshadow palettes still make sense in my collection, and for those that don't, I can simply declutter them. And throughout this video, or videos I should say, because it will be two parts, you will see that I've accumulated quite a few eyeshadow palettes. In fact, I think there are 86 or 87 in total, and there will be timestamps in the description box below as well for the different brands, because I did go in order by brand. But there will be a video coming up detailing more about this project, so if that sounds of interest to you, then definitely feel free to subscribe, and let's get into the collection. Alright, so we will be starting off with, you guessed it, Urban Decay. So first up, I have the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette, and this was actually my first mid-range, higher-end eyeshadow palette purchase, and it fell into an unfortunate spot because when I first got it, because it was so expensive, I didn't want to use it that much, and little old naive me didn't realize how difficult it was to actually get through an entire eyeshadow palette. And then as I started to collect more eyeshadow palettes, I didn't use this one as much because it wasn't new. So I will say through the years that I've picked this back up, I've still been really impressed with the looks, but for the reason that I just haven't reached for it that much, it will be going into my palette probation pile. Next up, this is the Urban Decay Naked Smoky palette, and I wasn't expecting too much from this, to be honest. I bought this when it was on sale, which was not even that long after this launched, and I'm actually really surprised that it's the only naked palette that's ever gone on sale, because I actually ended up really enjoying this. My fear with this was that it was going to be a bunch of the same sort of like silvery gray tones like you see here, but these actually are quite different and they have different finishes. And Urban Decay even threw in some warmer tones like these sort of gold and bronzy shades, and even have a nice little purple over here. So I actually really enjoy this palette. Every time I think to do a smoky eye, I think of this palette. So for that reason, it's going to stay in my collection. Next up here, we have the Urban Decay Smoked palette, and I bought this one because I wanted to incorporate more colors into my collection, and I thought jewel tones would be a good way to go, and I was right about that. I really do love the jewel tones in here. Overall, I think it's really nice to have all of these tones in a palette. I will say I feel like Urban Decay's inclusion of these mattes was kind of a really sad attempt, because you have two really light shades and two really dark shades with no sort of midtones. So because I don't reach for this as much, and I do have a lot more colors in my collection now and a lot more jewel tones, I will be putting this into my palette probation. This is the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. I was really excited to see Urban Decay come out with a warm tone palette with some mattes. I will say when I first got this, I remember liking the matte shades, but I did use it recently in conjunction with another palette, and I felt like the mattes weren't all that great compared to other mattes I have in my collection. So I'm actually going to be putting this one into my palette probation rotation as well. So now I thought we could jump into the Vice series from Urban Decay, which I absolutely love. This is the Urban Decay Vice Limited, which was the first Vice palette I personally ever purchased. And again, I bought it because I wanted to start incorporating more colors into my collection. And I liked that this one had a nice mix of pops of colors, but there's also some really nice metallic neutrals in here as well, which are absolutely amazing. I've never come away doing a look with this palette unhappy. And I feel like this is one that a lot of people had mixed feelings about. A lot of people have probably decluttered this palette from their collection, but in my collection, it's still a staple for me, so it's definitely staying. Next up, this is the Vice 3 palette from Urban Decay, and this actually came out before the Vice Limited, but I thought that this had been sold out. But again, palettes tend to pop up from Urban Decay here and there, so I purchased this as soon as I saw it. I didn't even get it for a sale price, I bought it full price, but I have no regrets there. I think this is a Vice palette that people tend to like more because it's got that more sort of cohesive look to it. You have these sort of purpley tones here, you've got these green blues, some cooler tones. Overall, a really nice palette. I haven't reached for it as much in the past, but it's still a really nice palette, and I love the tones in here, so it's definitely staying. Next up here, I have the Vice 4 palette. This is one that Urban Decay changed the formula on, and I say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that colorful metallic shades are Urban Decay's wheelhouse, and I'm not sure why they decided they needed to change the formula for this one. It definitely shows, because I feel like the shimmery shades in here, they just have a little bit more fallout than I'm used to dealing with from Urban Decay shades. Nonetheless, the colors in here are still really beautiful. Flame is probably one of my favorite colors in my entire eyeshadow collection, so for that reason, I am definitely holding on to this palette. Next up here I have the Urban Decay Vice Limited Reloaded palette. Now this is probably my least favorite Vice palette out of them all. Urban Decay came out with this palette in honor of their 20th anniversary, and I remember really thinking that everything they did that year was really cool because they were coming out with all of these collections that were sort of an homage to their brand when they launched back in the 90s. And as somebody who got into Urban Decay in the late 2000s or in the 2010s, it was really nice to see what they were doing back in the 90s, and I'm sure it was really cool for people who were fans in the 90s as well. But just something about the shades in here doesn't grab me, doesn't inspire me. So for that reason, I'm going to be putting this into my palette probation rotation. Next up, I thought I'd get this little guy out of the way. This is a little Urban Decay quad that I got as a 500 point perk from Sephora. There's nothing wrong with it. The shades are fine, but it's kind of pointless in my collection, so I'm actually going to be just straight up decluttering this. Next up here we have the Urban Decay Electric palette. This palette is absolutely amazing. The colors in here are amazing. The quality is amazing. I'm definitely not getting rid of this. Do I reach for this every day? No, but the quality of these pressed pigments is just unmatched. I've tried so many other neon colored pressed pigments and nothing has quite matched the quality of this palette. I'm really sad that they've discontinued it now, it seems, but I'm definitely keeping this in my collection. This is the Urban Decay Gwen Stefani palette, and honestly this is one I was not interested in at all when it first launched. I just saw like this row, kind of this area up here, and thought those shades all looked the same, and they kind of do on camera as well, but they actually are not. They all have sort of different finishes or iridescent shifts to them that are really cool. So I ended up really liking this palette, and I feel like I can actually get use out of all the colors in here, which is really awesome. Still haven't reached for it in a while just because I feel like a lot of my Urban Decay palettes, because they're bulkier, I keep them sort of in a different place than a lot of my other palettes, and they're sort of usually out of eye line for me. So I'm going to be putting this on palette probation. Alright guys, we are almost through Urban Decay, and this is my second to last palette from them, and probably one of my favorite ones in my entire collection. This is the Urban Decay Spectrum palette, and this was their holiday palette from 2015, and it's just, I love everything about this palette. I have nothing bad to say about it. I love the color selection, the layout, the formula of the shades in here. It's just a beautiful palette overall. Really great jewel tones, and I'm definitely hanging on to this one. Alright, and lastly from Urban Decay we have the very hard to show Heavy Metals palette, and I bought this one again because I am a huge Urban Decay fan. This was actually their holiday palette for 2017, and I will say I was not that blown away by the color selection here. The formula for most of the shades is fine. They're really nicely foiled metallics. Some of them again are a little bit fallout prone, but really nice formula overall. It's just something about the shades in here that I'm just not that blown away by. You know, sort of some of the shades in here are just too similar to one another. You know, you got these two silvers going on, even these two purples kind of look similar, some of the neutral shades look similar, so that I wasn't really the biggest fan of, and for that reason I'm actually going to be putting this on palette probation. Alright guys, so we've gotten through all of the Urban Decay palettes in my collection. So over here on this side I have my palette probation palettes. I have 6 total from Urban Decay. Again, Gwen Stefani, the Urban Decay Limited Reloaded, the Naked Heat, the Naked 3, the Urban Decay Smoked, and the Heavy Metals palette. In my keep pile I have 6 Urban Decay palettes as well. The Limited Reloaded, the Spectrum, the Electric, the Vice 4, the Naked Smoky, and the Vice 3. And the one palette that I'm going to be decluttering from Urban Decay is just this little quad here that again was just a Sephora point perk. Alright guys, so the next brand we will talk about is Too Faced, and I have all my palettes laid out in front of me. I only have 6 eyeshadow palettes from this brand. I mean, I only have 6. That's still a lot of eyeshadow palettes to have from a single brand, but I used to have a lot more Too Faced, particularly these 9pan palettes, but I've decluttered those throughout the years. And this is the brand that's the eyeshadow brand that's been in my collection the longest aside from Urban Decay, so I thought that it would be appropriate to go here next. So first up here we have the OG, the chocolate bar. People really put this palette on a pedestal, and I have so many feelings about this palette. I don't think it's a bad palette, but I just never have felt that it deserved the hype and amount of praise that it got when it was first released and for the first few years that it was out. It is genuinely a mediocre palette. Half the shades in here I think are really great, and the other half are either duds or very mediocre. Too Faced has all these like matte or like satin based shades with glitter in them, and see, Urban Decay is an example of a brand that does glitter well. Too Faced, not so much. So not sure why they have continued to try to do that kind of thing. It does not work for them in my opinion, and yeah, this palette is definitely going on probation. Next up we have the semi-sweet chocolate bar, and I think this one overall is better quality than the original chocolate bar. I just feel like there really aren't that many dud shades in here like there were in the original chocolate bar. The only thing is I feel like the shades in here that I like, I still don't like as much as the shades that I really like in the original chocolate bar, but I still do like the shade selection in here, so I haven't reached for it in a while. I'm gonna put it on probation. Next up we have the Chocolate Bonbons palette, and I actually really like this palette. Unpopular opinion, I know, but it's been really good to me. I feel like this is a very special palette in my collection because it is mostly cool tones, but I feel like these are cool tones that work really well on my skin, and as a person with a darker complexion, I really appreciate that because a lot of cool tone shadows can be formulated to look quite ashy or chalky on my skin tone, so this actually is definitely staying in my collection. Next up here we have the Sweet Peach palette, and I just don't know what to do about this one. I really like the colors in here, I like the formula, but the smell, man, the smell of this is just, it's insane. And I have had this since it first launched, so I feel like the smell has gotten slightly better. I don't know what to do with this. I feel like I should leave it open and hope that the smell like dissipates, but it just, it's overwhelming, it's obnoxious, it kind of gives me a headache. So I'm on the fence about this one, but I guess I should put it on palette probation. We'll see. We'll see what we're gonna do with this one. So this next palette I have here is the Stardust by Vegas Nay palette. It was a limited edition palette from Too Faced, and I remember this palette being really special to me because of these sort of warm tone matte shades. I know warm tone mattes are really just overdone nowadays, but I remember a time not too long ago, just a couple years ago, when not that many companies were doing these like warm tone mattes, and as somebody with a deeper skin tone who really likes those shades for transition purposes, I really enjoyed those shades in this palette. What I never enjoyed about this palette and what made me on the fence about it in the first place were these like metallic lilac shades, which very pretty, but they all look the same, I swear. So for that reason, because these warm tone mattes, they're not that unique anymore, even though like this shade right here, Showgirl, is like so freaking pretty. It's so gorgeous. But I know I have colors like that in my collection, so I'm going to go ahead and actually just straight up declutter this one. So next up, this is the Too Faced A La Mode Eyes palette. This was a limited edition 9-pan palette from them that also was around for a really long time. I remember I got this alongside the Too Faced Naked 3 palette. That was when around this palette first came out, and I used this one more often because it was not as expensive as the Naked 3 palette. But what I really hate about these 9-pan palettes, and why I have decluttered so many of them in the past, is because I really hate that these 3 shades right here, they're always freaking off-white shades, and I just don't understand that. I mean, I don't want 3 of the same shades in any palette, let alone these off-white shades that I just personally can't even use. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's only 9 shades in this palette. It's valuable real estate. Why Too Faced does this continuously does not make any sense to me, and until they change something, I will not buy any of their 9-pan palettes. And by the way, I did not pan this shade. Again, this was back in my more naive eyeshadow days. For some reason, I carried my eyeshadow palette around with me, even though whoever has the need to reapply their eyeshadow, nobody. So yeah, this one is just, it's kind of trashed, and don't really care for it anymore. So I'm going to be just getting rid of this one straight up. Alright guys, so out of my 6 Too Faced eyeshadow palettes, these 2 I'm going to be just completely getting rid of. These 3 right here, palette probation, although Sweet Peach is like, I don't know, because the smell of it just gets on my nerves. And my Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons is staying. Next up, I thought I'd talk about Lorac, again, just because it's a brand that's been in my collection for quite some time. First up here, we have the Lorac Pro 1, another kind of OG eyeshadow palette. And I definitely understand more of the hype behind this one. I just feel like it's laid out very nicely. You have a really nice variety of shades in here. I'm not the biggest fan of Lorac's shimmer formula. I find it's a little bit too subtle for my liking. And again, like these 3 off-white shades, like why? That's honestly probably the reason why I don't have more Lorac palettes, because I feel like they throw 50 million white shades into an eyeshadow palette, and I just don't need that in my life. But yeah, I don't reach for this often, so it's gonna go on to palette probation. Next up, I have this Lorac Pro Matte palette, and yeah, I don't know what I was thinking with this one. I don't know, I really thought this burgundy would be nice, and I like this mauve shade. But yeah, these two colors are very similar. These three shades basically just look like pure ash on my skin tone, so yeah, this is definitely just getting immediately decluttered. Next up, I have the Lorac Unzipped palette. This palette I absolutely love, and I feel like this came out around the same time as the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette, and had I known about this palette, I probably would have opted for this over the Naked 3 palette. The shades in here are just really beautiful, and I love that you have these really nice matte shades to kind of help put the look together. So I haven't reached for this in a while, but every time I do, I know I'm just really floored by the look, so I'm going to go ahead and keep this one. It is safe. Next up, I have the Lorac Unzipped Gold palette, and unfortunately this one just doesn't even have a formula that holds a candle to the original Unzipped. Again, don't know why Lorac decided to change the formula up on this. The only shade in here that's stunning is this Unleashed shade, and I'm not going to keep a palette for one shade. The rest of it, as you can see, is quite messy. The other metallic shades, they're quite chunky, just really hard to work with. Even the matte shades in here, which are sort of warmer or neutral leaning, are very ashy on my skin tone, so this is definitely going to be decluttered. Alright, so out of my 4 Lorac palettes, I will be keeping the Unzipped palette, decluttering the Lorac Unzipped Gold as well as the Pro Matte, and putting the Lorac Pro on palette probation. Alright, moving right along to Tarte. As you can see, I have 5 eyeshadow palettes from them. This is another brand I used to have a lot more palettes from, but I've decluttered them over the years. First up here, I have the Tarte Lip palette, and this was the first all matte eyeshadow palette I'd purchased. I mostly bought it for the packaging, but I'm really glad I decided to get it. I actually really enjoy the quality of this palette, and I love the sort of purple tones in here. I haven't used it in quite a while, so I am going to put it on palette probation. Next up, I have the Tarte Lit and Bloom palette, and I absolutely love this palette. I think this one has done a really good job of replacing the other neutral starter palettes that were on the market. This one I think has a really nice mixture of mattes and shimmers. I like the fact that you've got 3 shimmers that are all sort of different from one another, and just a really nice range of mattes as well. Every shade in here feels deliberate and well placed, so I'm definitely going to hold on to this well-rounded palette. Next up here is the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette. This was a limited edition palette, and I actually was not interested in picking this up, but I went into an Ulta and I swatched it while it was on sale actually, and I went ahead and picked it up because the shades in here are really pretty. I think this is a good complementary palette if you already have a lot of jewel tones, because these are sort of like a brighter shades. So if you wanted to do like an accent color, or even just have like a really pretty matching inner corner highlight, or sort of a complementary color inner corner highlight, I think that these are some really nice options. So I'm actually definitely going to be holding on to this one. So next up here, I have the Tarte Styled by Harouche palette. This was a limited edition palette from Tarte in collaboration with the Instagram guru Harouche, I guess. I didn't know who she was, but apparently she's an Instagram guru. So there are 6 eyeshadow shades in this palette, so you already know you're not going to get a lot of variety out of it. However, I did like the shades that were in here, and even the blush worked decently well on my skin tone, but I am going to go ahead and declutter this. It's just not integral to my collection. And on top of that, Harouche had a whole little racist incident on her Instagram that she kind of never addressed and apologized for, and I'm not about that. And Tarte played a role in that too, because they reposted her image and then they made a really whack apology, which I think they ended up having to apologize for their apology. So I'm kind of side-eyeing Tarte as a brand now anyways, but yeah, this palette I'm just going to go ahead and declutter. Next up, we have the Tarte Tartist Pro palette. This is actually my favorite eyeshadow palette in my entire collection. Like, if I had to just choose one eyeshadow palette out of all the other ones and leave them, this is the one that I would choose, because I just feel like this is such a complete palette. You have, I think I have almost everything I would want in here to do a look. Obviously, I'd be missing my bold colors, but as far as neutral looks go, I think this one has everything. These metallic shades over here are freaking amazing. They have a really nice foiled sheen to them without that really thick dimethicone feel, so they're very, very easy to work with. And then the matte shades in here are just really nice, and I mean the tones in here are just great. You've got warm tones, cool tones, berries, purples, oranges, just really nice. Again, very, very well-rounded palette, so this one's definitely staying in my collection. So with my 5 Tarte eyeshadow palettes and where they stand, my original Tarte Lit is going on probation. These 3 are staying: the Make Believe in Yourself, the Tarte Lit and Bloom, and the Tartist Pro. And this Styled by Harouche palette, decluttered. Okay, so next up I thought we'd talk about Stila. I have 4 eyeshadow palettes from them. Stila is one of those brands I feel like you just don't hear that many people talking about them, which is really a shame. I feel like they actually have some really nice products, but I do have these 4 eyeshadow palettes from them. So this first palette I have is their Mind palette from the Eyes of the Window collection. Stila tends to release their palettes in series or collections, so this is from that one, and this is an all matte palette, as you can see, and I absolutely love this palette. You know, these 3 shades here are a little redundant, but the other shades in here I do really enjoy, and I'm going to be holding on to this palette. Next up, this is the Spirit palette, also from the Eyes of the Window collection, and I just really like this one as well. These are more so subtle shades, although I will say some of them are quite shiny. You do have Kitten in here, which is their sort of stand out shade from their collection. But yeah, just really nice tones, and they really complement the shades in Mind. So I just wanted to show both of these together. I love pulling both of these out and using them in conjunction with one another, and I'm always pleased with my looks. So I'm definitely going to hold on to both of these. Also, I just really quickly wanted to point out that both of the Eyes of the Window palettes that I have, and I imagine this entire series, they come with these plastic inserts that actually have quotes on them, which is so cool to me. So, and also I just am now noticing that the colors actually match the palettes as well. So this one's like a gold color to match the Mind palette, this one's like a rose gold color to match the Spirit palette. But this one says, "The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination," and that's Albert Einstein. And then the Spirit quote says, "Where the spirit does not work with the hand, there is no art," Leonardo da Vinci. So I don't know, I just thought that that was a really insightful, artful detail to their eyeshadow palettes, and the quality is great, and I feel like Stila does such a good job with their palettes, and they just don't get as much recognition as they deserve. So these next 2 Stila palettes are also from the same collection, as you can probably tell from the packaging. This was from a collection called the Perfect Me, Perfect Hue collection, and this first one here is in the shade Tan Deep. So the idea behind this collection was they released 4 different palettes geared towards different skin tones, which I think is such a brilliant idea. I wish more companies took that approach, because the whole idea that you know, eyeshadow palettes can be universal and everything works for everybody is not true. And I like that Stila acknowledged that by coming out with a collection of palettes geared towards different skin tones. So this is actually the tan, or the medium tan ones. Obviously you can get any one of them that you want, or any ones that you think will suit your skin tone. So I liked the colors in here, and the quality of the products is great as well. Obviously not a lot of versatility, but I love this. I think this is like, I'm not big on like traveling palettes. That used to be something I was into, like, but I don't travel that much. But I will say I think this is an excellent eyeshadow palette, and like just all-in-one palette for traveling, and I'm definitely holding on to this one as well as the next one. So this one is the Tan Deep one, and I'll just open it up to show you what it looks like. So again, gorgeous colors. These cheek products are beautiful as well in both of these palettes, and I'm going to keep both of them. Alright, moving right along here, I have my Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes, and I will tell you straight away that I am not going to be placing any of these on probation. So is this going to be a brand that I keep all the palettes from? Find out immediately. I'm actually not going to be keeping every palette from this brand. I'm going to be getting rid of this one. This is the World Traveler Shadow Couture World Traveler, whatever. Yeah, I personally don't care for this palette at all, and if you are a makeup enthusiast and you like this palette, I question your judgment. No, but in all seriousness, the matte shades in here are amazing. Well, except for Soft Peach, that one's kind of trash, but Morocco Fudge and Noir I really enjoy. In fact, I have them in full sizes from Anastasia Beverly Hills. Pink Champagne is the only metallic shade in here that isn't shite, and this one I own as a full size as well. The other metallic shades in here are just not good. They're very not pigmented. As you can see, some of them have hard pan. So yeah, and I held on to this for the longest time for such stupid reasons. I was just like, well, everybody else likes this palette, and it was so coveted for a long time, but I realized that's so stupid. Like, don't do that. If you don't like something, regardless of how the majority of other people feel about it, or that's your perception of how the majority of other people feel about it, just get rid of it. So that leaves me with these 4 palettes here. I am actually going to be keeping all of these. I'll just go through these really quickly. The Master palette by Mario, I really like. This formula is more of a satin finish formula, and then there are some mattes in here as well. I've been using this lately for work, and I really enjoy it. I'm not usually a fan of satin shades, but I do like the tones in here, so this one's definitely staying in my collection. So I have the Modern Renaissance, of course, and I know mine looks untouched, and to be honest, I don't reach for it all that often, but I do really enjoy it. Every time I do pick it up, I find that the shades just, every look I've done at this palette just looks so well blended, just so even, just really nice. So I'm gonna be holding on to this one. I don't reach for it that often because it's powdery, and I don't want to mess with the packaging, man. Like the packaging really gets me with these, but I do really like this palette. Next up, I have the Subculture palette, which I feel like is the exact opposite of the Modern Renaissance palette. This one definitely is not easy to work with, I will say that, but I have worked with it quite extensively. In fact, I was thinking about doing a video for it, but then I decided not to beat the dead horse since there are already 50 million videos about this palette here on YouTube. And in using it extensively, I've found that I like this palette. I kind of just, it has a learning curve. There's some shades that don't work well together. There's some shades that are going to blend and become darker colors, and I do feel like that's way more work than needs to go into an eyeshadow palette. But since I've already put in the legwork and I kind of have an idea of what works in this palette, I don't mind using it, and I do really like the tones in here. I just know I would never reach for this palette if I had to do a really quick eyeshadow look, because these definitely do take time. Lastly, here I have the Prison palette, which I did do a full video on, so I won't talk too much about it, but I will say I just love this palette, and it's definitely staying. But man, the hard pan with the metallic shades, Anastasia, you gotta do something about that. So next up, I thought I'd talk about my Melt eyeshadow stacks. Technically not eyeshadow palettes, but I thought I'd talk about them anyway since they come in these sort of sets. And I definitely need to figure out which ones I want to keep and which ones I haven't been using, because again, these are the packaging of these, so nice, so pretty to photograph, but so impractical. So again, the way these are stored, I don't necessarily reach for them all the time, so this will be good to put into my palette probation project. So first up, this is the Dark Matter stack, and this is one of the first ones they came out with, and I absolutely love the colors in here. I know that they are super basic, but I just feel like they did a good job of choosing, I don't know, colors to put in here, and this burgundy shade Enigma is a really pretty burgundy, so I'm going to be keeping these. I really like the quality of their matte eyeshadows, and the color selection here is actually really nice. Next up, this is their Lovesick stack, and this was their other original stack along with the Dark Matter stack. This is another one that I absolutely love. At first I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it because I didn't know how much you would get out of the shades, but I love them. This red here is really amazing. Even this blue is so amazing, and I know I have nothing like it in my collection. This purple is one of my favorite purples in my collection, and this is just like a nice peachy gold duochrome, so I love this stack and I'm definitely holding on to it. Next up, this is the Gunmetal stack, and this one I honestly haven't used all too much, but I know that these sort of shimmery shades in here the glitters are a little loose for my liking, but I do want to give this more of a try, so I'll be putting it into my probation pile. Next up here, I have the Radioactive stack, and this is just one of those instances of a pressed pigment that just doesn't live up to the quality of the Urban Decay Electrics. Again, these are just a little bit too loose for my liking, but I do want to give them a fair shot, so I will put these into my probation pile. Last up, we have the Rust stack, which as you can see here is super basic. This one comes with 5 shades instead of the usual 4. The shade up here, just ignore that. I dropped it and had to repress it because it cracked. These are nice, but I don't know. I just feel like, again, too little too late. We kind of already have these shades. I feel like maybe a couple of these are maybe even similar to the dark stack up there, so I'm gonna put this on probation. My initial thought behind getting this was, oh, I can use it with like other eyeshadow palettes that are missing these types of colors, but guess what, because of this packaging I haven't really reached for it, so we'll see if I can get use out of it. So with my temperamental melt stacks here that I definitely want to put away before I break them, these two up here, the Dark Matter and the Lovesick, I'm definitely keeping these. And then these 3 right here, the Gunmetal, Radioactive, and the Rust stack, oh my gosh, I'm going to be putting these into my probation pile. It actually looks kind of cool when they're all magnetized together like that.